In the case of the FEMA trailers, they were made quickly and distributed quickly because there were obviously pressing needs for them, and there was that issue that they came out onto the market, out into use so quickly.
I think it's pretty sad that they're using these trailers that have been proven over the years to not be healthy to live in. They're just, it's a complete disregard for the health of people that are here to work.
I mean, they need places to stay. So, I mean, if they could do it with trailers, that's fine, but they should be doing it with a trailer that's safe for everybody.
Formaldehyde is an off-gassing product of, I think, the particle board and probably some of the other synthetic parts of the trailer, whether it's the carpet or the paneling, any kind of synthetically derived paneling.
The people that's got sick in the past years that we've used them for Rita and Cameron and stuff, and if we use them here, you're going to hurt innocent people that need to get sick. They're just trying to help out the community.
The acute irritation of eyes, nose, mouth, lungs, possible exacerbation of existing conditions like asthma or another chronic lung disease, possibly skin irritations. But what you'll hear from people if there are high levels anyway is that they can smell it. Now, whether you can smell those very low levels and some of the, if you read 0.1 parts per billion kind of, or 0.1 parts per million kind of numbers, I'm not certain. If you remember high school biology class and what frogs smelled like, might have a smell kind of like that.
Thank you. Mr. Waxman and members of the committee, it's a great honor to be here today and to discuss the experiences my wife and I endured with FEMA and the temporary trail they provided us. But at the same time, it's sad that this hearing has to take place at all. On December 2nd, 2005, FEMA delivered our camper. When we first took possession of the camper, we noticed a strong new smell inside the camper. We aired out the camper as FEMA instructed, turning on the heat, opening the windows, turning on the exhaust vent. The camper stayed that way for the next 4 months. The first night we stayed in the camper, my wife woke up several times with a runny nose. At one point, she turned the light on and realized that her runny nose was actually a bloody nose. I was also beginning to show symptoms of my own, which included scratchy eyes, scratchy throat, coughing, and runny nose. The symptoms we had continued for weeks, then months, and we finally thought about just leaving. But at the time, we couldn't leave. We were still fighting with the Army Corps of Engineers, with FEMA. We had debris all over our yard, money was short, and we were stuck. Then one morning when I woke up, I found our pet cockatiel was very lethargic, unable to move. He was regurgitating, unable to keep his balance. I immediately called the veterinarian, who told us to get him out of the camper immediately. So we did. We took him outside. We got ready to leave, and within an hour, the bird was beginning to get better. He wasn't better, but he was getting better. We took him to the veterinarian, who told us that the camper was probably making him sick. We asked him how that was possible, and he said that, well, there were many chemicals inside the camper, especially a new one. He said that formaldehyde was the most likely cause. He said if we don't get the bird out of there, the bird will probably die. He explained to us that birds, much like children, breathe much more rapidly than adults, and they take in much more of the toxins that are inside the camper, and that he's going to show symptoms before we do, but that we should also get out. From that point on, we kept the bird out outside as often as we could, and we really do believe that that bird saved our lives. At that point, I started to research formaldehyde and started to find out what formaldehyde can do to us and others like us who were living in these campers. What I found out almost immediately is that the EPA lists formaldehyde as a carcinogen. There was also a common problem inside the campers, and that all the smoke detectors inside the FEMA campers would go off for no reason at all. You'd go into FEMA campers and find the batteries ripped out, smoke detectors torn off the wall, and so forth. What I found out was that formaldehyde can set off smoke detectors. I checked with a firefighter friend of mine who knew someone in the industry, and they did confirm that formaldehyde at high levels would set off smoke detectors. I then called FEMA and talked to them about the problems, and they told me to, quote, air out the camper. I explained to them that I'd been airing out the camper for 4 months, and they said, well, continue to air out the camper. They also told me that some people are just, quote, more chemically sensitive than others. That statement kind of made me angry. As a former U.S. Army infantry officer and as a former police officer, I've been tased, pepper sprayed, I've been through CS gas chambers, and I do not consider myself to be a chemically sensitive person. Anyways, I started to look for ways to mitigate the problem. What I did first was I tore out all of the exposed particle board I could find. I replaced it with pine plank. I then went ahead, that did nothing. I then went ahead and bought some ferns that the Stennis Space Center said to use to try and reduce formaldehyde. That didn't work either. I then got a substance used by the mortuary business to try and absorb formaldehyde. That didn't work. Then I purchased an air purifier, a professional one, 15-pound charcoal filter. It moves 400 cubic feet of air per minute, and it's designed to cover 1,500 square feet. That also had no effect. Eventually, I ended up testing my own camper after I called FEMA numerous times and asked them to help, and they refused. When I tested my camper, I found a company called American Chemical Sensors out of Boca Raton, Florida. They mailed me a test kit and actually told me that I should get out of the camper when they heard of our symptoms. They said our symptoms made it look as though we were having formaldehyde poisoning. I got the sensor, hung it inside the camper, and took it down, mailed it back to the company, and when I got the results were 0.22 parts per million, or twice what the EPA considers safe. I called FEMA and told them what was going on, and they told me that, quote, I should be happy with the camper that I have, and that we do not have any other campers to supply you. I couldn't believe what FEMA was telling me. Essentially, they were telling me that they were going to do nothing about the problem, even though I've already alerted them that what we were living in was cancer-causing. That outside ambient air tested as high as 5 parts per million. Not 0.5 parts per million, but 5 parts per million outdoor ambient air. I called FEMA, told them what I found, and again they told me, sorry, there's nothing we can do for you. At that point, I called the local television station, and they decided to run the story. The next morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from FEMA who told me they were on their way with a new camper. The new camper arrived, and when it did, the FEMA representatives arrived shortly before the camper did and wanted to cut my sewer lines, my water lines, and pull the camper out. I refused. I wouldn't let them. When the camper showed up, it showed up in front of the driveway. I walked outside, didn't even walk up to the camper, and I could smell the formaldehyde from my driveway. The workers who delivered the camper also said they could not go inside. The formaldehyde was so bad. I told them to take the camper and go home. I didn't want it. At that point, FEMA called me at one point and said, quote, what are we going to have to do to make you happy? And they said also, so you didn't refuse it because of the type of camper it was. During that conversation, they also wanted to record my conversation with them, which I thought was kind of strange. I've worked in police work for a number of years, and I can tell you that what it sounded to me like is that they were trying to get together a chain of custody. They were trying to put together evidence. She said, well, then you're going to have to wait till Monday. We'll take care of you on Monday. Anyways, this went back and forth for a long amount of time with FEMA. It wasn't long after that I was visited by 2 members of FEMA. They showed up at the house on Sunday night. They said they wanted to see the camper. The one person who showed up identified himself as the head of the Mississippi Camper Program. He said to me that FEMA will do whatever it takes to fix the problem. He said if he had to have 10 workers work 2 days straight, he would take care of everything. The interesting thing with this conversation is that I asked him at one point where he was staying. He was from out of state. He said, I'm renting a gutted apartment in Gulfport. He wasn't staying in a FEMA camper. He was staying in an apartment in Gulfport, taking up rental housing that really should have gone to the residents of the Gulf Coast. After going through this for a number of days and spending 5 more days in my truck in my driveway, I finally had enough with FEMA, and I told them to take their property and get off my land. At that point, they came back and took their camper, and I went out and purchased my own camper, which I will tell you is formaldehyde-free. The interesting thing about that camper is my wife and I paid $50,000 for that camper. It has a king-size bed, a fireplace, it has a washer and dryer, it has computer workstations. It is a very large camper with 3 slide-outs, very comfortable. From everything I've read up to this point, FEMA has paid approximately $65,000 for each one of the campers that they supplied to Gulf Coast residents after the storm. As I sit in front of you today, I just want to say that I am one of the lucky ones. My wife and I were safe now. We're out of our camper. We're no longer exposed to that level of formaldehyde, but there are tens of thousands of people who are still there living in those campers every day. And in conclusion, I just want to say that we lost a great deal through our dealings with FEMA, not least of which is our faith in government. And I can truly say that a buzz term that's been used around Washington for a long time is a culture of life. And I just think that a culture of life really ends up just being rhetoric when you see things like this. It's not real world. And in the real world, you're on your own. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart.